Hey everyone, Jim T. Graham with RCGroups.com, and we are back with Mike from Robart and ZAP-a-Adhesives, and we have more to discuss. What's happening, Mike?
Everything's good over here. It looks like we're back talking about glues again. We talked about our thin ZAP CA last time, and we're ready to go with today's new video on
RCGroups.com.
And we're talking about ZAP-a-Gap.
ZAP-a-Gap. And so I wanted to say that I created a feature on our last video that is currently up on YouTube. And I had a guy reply, he said, I've been using ZAP for years and I had no idea I was supposed to keep the cap and that it snapped back on.
Oh.
So it's the simplest things, right?
Right. We get that a lot when we're talking to people, whether it's at a show, over the phone, either way. A lot of people are, they are like, you mean I could have done that? Like, yeah, you really could have done that.
So let me ask my question. Let's say that I'm packing some ZAP thin or medium. What is the difference in ZAP-a-Gap versus the other CAs that you sell?
Okay, so ZAP-a-Gap, when we talk about the ZAP-a-Gap, it is the gap, right? We know ZAP across the other CAs, it's a cyanoacrylate. But now when we start getting a little bit thicker, so we're going into our medium viscosity, we can actually ZAP-a-Gap. So if you don't have the perfect cut, let's say you've got a broken piece and we've got some type of a gap in there, you still can make that bond and it's going to adhere that for you. And we'll talk about that when I jump over to some of the wood samples and things like that. We got similar to what we did with the ZAP CA one. So we get a little bit thicker, we start seeing more of a gap filling ability. And then let's go, and then it really gets even more once we start talking about the zip kickers that you'll do in future videos.
Okay. Well, let's go and take a look.
All right. Over here. So this is the main line of ZAP glues. So similar to the thin, we offer it in a quarter, a half, 1, 2, and 4 ounce bottles. So at your traditional hobby shop, this is what you're going to see here, as well as the ZAP brush on and our minis. So why don't we do this, Jim? Why don't we go through these two, and so that people that are interested in, we haven't seen these before, and then we'll go into gluing some of the woods together and things like that. All right?
Okay. I do have a question. The brush on, what would I use that for?
Well, I'll show you right now. Push these over here. So with the brush on, it's carded in your blister pack. Let's go ahead and open this up. This is for additional controls that you might want with your glue. So, quick tip, before you take this out, okay, there is I'm not sure if you can see you see there's a little insert in the bottle. Can you see that, Jim?
The plastic sleeve, right?
Yeah, there's a plastic sleeve. Well, this plastic sleeve is actually tapered on the inside here. And what that does is now you can wipe off the bristles of the glue, and you don't get the glue around the threads. And then you can continue to use your bottle of glue so you don't glue the cap onto the ZAP-a-Gap.
That's awesome. I use paints and things like that, and I'm always wiping off the edge as I come in, and then all that paint just is useless after that. So you're countering that and saving the glue.
Yep. So this is, so instead of a drip, now you can literally brush your glues on to the surface that you want to glue together and then make your bond. Sorry. I got to get used to this camera being vertical here. I keep wanting to, face it towards me.
Right.
Then you can make your bond and you get exact precision. So The other nice thing with this is, and I should have brought it in, I just actually just thought about it too, is if let's say you want to add a piece of wood to a spot, but you don't want to put a big dollop on or a drip on and have it ooze around. You can brush this onto your accent piece, because our jewelry makers do this a lot. And then you add it on to your piece or your model, whatever you're working on, so that you have full control over whatever you're adding onto your model. So that's where the brush on really comes in. This is great. So for the RC model, when you're working on your cockpit, if you're doing rivets, if you're adding on an accent to the outside of the model, that's where this can really come in handy. With this and a pair of like a tweezer, you can really add a lot of fine micro accents and really make that model pop.
And we were talking about earlier, whenever I use CA, somehow I always have it on my fingertips. And I don't even know that I knew about the brush on ZAP-a-Gap. So this might be a great way for me to control my CA application moving forward.
Yeah. So that's part number PT-100. See if I can get it in focus here. So it's PT-100. So if you're doing a search for it, that's where you're going to find the ZAP-a-Gap brush on.
And PS, on the Robart page, all the glues that we have or will talk about are going to be located here, and I'll have a link to that in the description below.
Thank you. So the next one we should talk about is the single use. Now, the single use is great for your flight box, for your toolbox, tackle box, your vehicle, because you're not going to get any leakage at all. You got full control of them. And let's try to pop out one of them here.
So you can throw 3 or 4 of these in your drawer of your toolbox.
Yep. So there's 5 in a card. They're they're 0.01 ounce or a half gram tube. So it's a fully sealed tube. It's a fully metal sealed tube. Your cap does have a micro tip on it, okay. And it's self-piercing. So we just screw that on, and now I've pierced the tube, and you get a nice little droplet that comes out of it. And you still get your glue bottle. So you still get the ZAP-a-Gap glue, but you're not going to get any leakage. It's great for sitting in that toolbox or your flight box and whatnot.
And so this is a one use only. So once I use it, that is over.
Yes, it is. It's over because you have no way of sealing it back up.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's why it's great for traveling, and because you use it, you're done. I don't have to travel with a large bottle of glue in my flight box,
which could be dangerous.
Yep, it can be.
And by dangerous, I mean if you had leakage, then everything's glued to the bottom of your tray, which I've done.
Yes. And a little tip: this is what I do when I travel with my glues, and I keep all my glues in a Ziploc bag. That's just what I do. Because with the heat, if you're in heat of summer and then cold of winter or whatnot, if that cap pops or whatnot, I guess I'm honest to a fault, right? I shouldn't be saying what our negatives are, but I guess that's makes for, if anybody's ever talked to me on the phone, you'll know that I'll tell you the positives and negatives to just about everything that we have. So
gotcha.
Yeah. So So the ZAP-a-Gap brush on and the ZAP-a-Gap single use are the specialty products. Also, we do offer these on the fly fishing line. It's highly sought after by the fly fishermen and women out there. So the ZAP-a-Gap brush on is where you really we see more sales of the brush on or on the fly fishing side than we do in the modeling side because of the precision precision placement of the glue.
Yeah, I want it.
Yeah, and the same here for the drip bottle. So, and on the carded option for the fly fishing, it actually comes with our flexi tip, which will go into tips in a future video also. So
awesome.
Yep. So let's talk about just ZAP-a-Gap in general. So this is our medium CA. This is our catch-all. Let me see if I have a larger bottle. It shows up a little bit better in the camera shot here. So is this one open? Yeah, here we go. It is our medium viscosity. So you get the gap filling formula. Bonds virtually anything. So we'll see this with plastics, woods, stoneware, anything. It really does work very well. And even on the oily surfaces. So let's say you've got some paint, so you got an oil-based paint, things like that. It will bond even to that. So this is a great all-around. This is our all-around glue.
Okay.
Similar to the ZAP CA that we talked about. Okay, the bottle is built the same. You've got your molded on cap that you'll break off, flip it around, and then you use it as your cap. And then it does come with our Z end tip. Again, we always recommend that you use the tips, and then so that now you've the cap. I can pop off our cap. Put your tip on. And like we talked about last week, when you're using your glues, when you're done to be able to use more and more, go ahead and just burp that bottle and blow that out into a rag, and that then you can reuse it over and over again.
So let's say that I was buying a really big bottle of CA. Should I buy a few extra tips just for safety? And is that a thing I can do?
Yes, you can. So, like I said before, when we'll talk about tips in a future video, but we do offer the flexi tip as well as the Z end. This is our Z end tip. So if you like something a little more rigid, this is that one. And if you like something a little more flexible, then we'll go into the Z end. But yes, definitely buy some additional tips. That will extend the life of your bottle, because this will clog up over time. You'll forget to burp it. There'll be a little residual, so on and so forth. So you'll cut those down, and then you'll crack it off, and then you can put a brand new tip on, and then use the whole bottle down.
Got it.
Yep. So it's a little bit slower setting than the ZAP CA. Right. So last week we talked about ZAP CA, how fast acting it is, right? This one here will take 10 to 15 seconds. Also, remember, less is more. So what we'll do is put a small droplet on, and then mate the other side together. And then we could count it out, or 15 seconds. So let's say we're at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So now you're set
It
up.
worked. Nice.
Right. We always hold our breath. Everybody holds our breath. Holds the breath when they're like, "Is it really going to work?" Yes, it's worked. It's done. Right.
Okay. Now do the tear apart so that everyone can see.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to see on this one. This is a light to light, but there is wood This one here has gotten out of here. You can see the grain has ended. Let me see if I can get like some darker colors. What I got? Okay.
And the point there is it's not the glue that lets go, it's the wood.
Right, exactly. So we'll go 2 different colored glue woods, and so that we can really see. But yeah, that's really what you want to see, is you want to see the material breaking, not the bond. We talked about that last week also. And when you get the material break, the glue is stronger than the material. So in these cases here, I'm using balsa wood, which is your traditional building woods, your building material. You have balsa wood or some of the plywoods, things like that, right? So now we can really see the coloration here, where the lighter balsa wood has been bonded right to the darker balsa wood.
Right, where the glue ends and the wood tear begins.
Yep. All right. Now, the nice thing with the ZAP-a-Gap, right? So let's say you had a break. We've had an accident, and we need to break. We need to bond all this back together. So that's where the ZAP-a-Gap comes in. As you can see, I'm going to be a little rough about this, and we don't have a perfect joint here. You don't have a perfect joint, but we still need to glue this all back together. Well, how do you do that? Well, because if you put a thin glue on this joint, the end grain is going to act like a sponge. It's going to soak up that thin CA, and it's going to be soaked in here before it actually gets to glue together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add the ZAP-a-Gap here, and then I will go ahead and push the other one together. And what you're going to have is that medium viscosity, that ZAP-a-Gap, is going to fill in all the gaps of that break so that you still get a solid bond. We're zapping that all together.
You're filling in the gap.
Yep. And now we've got a good solid bond in there. Or let's say that you're working. Create a little sliver here. You're working on your model, and you put your joints together, and you know what? We don't have a perfect seam where you're going to run that, because if you run a thin CA down there, you'll have bond here where the joint is nice and tight, right. But up here you don't have that. So in this case, what you could do is you can run your ZAP-a-Gap very similar like we did with the ZAP CA. So I'm going to run it right down the joint. And let that wick down in here so that I'm filling that gap and I'm still getting a bond. I'll flip this over. So just like you would do at home when you're working on your models, we can run that right down that joint. And what we're going to see now, I'm going to flip it sideways, is you don't see any sitting on top. It's actually gone down into that joint and glued it together. Now, here's the downfall to this method, is I'm not following the less is more rule.
Right.
Okay. So I've got a lot of glue in there. It's going to take longer than the 15 seconds for this to bond. So there's 2 ways that we can handle that. One is I could spray it with an accelerator, which we'll talk about again later on. Or with any glue, it's just time. You keep it clamped up, and it will bond on its own over time. Okay. So that's the nice part about the ZAP-a-Gap, is the gap filling qualities of it.
And that would come in super handy if you were working on something that was internal to the plane. You couldn't take it out. You couldn't align, you had to work on it as is. This would allow you to get down in there.
Correct. And that's where these extended tips really help also. So,
Right.
like, an extended tip on our little quarter-ounce bottle, you can really reach down into some small spaces. You can really reach down into some small spaces.
And even that one shot will get you down there even more.
Right. So I don't have a tape measure on me right now, but yeah, that's a nice little reach that you can get down in and give it a little squeeze and get some glue right where you want it.
And this, man, part of the video that we're making right now are those tips. Would you think that you would need a smaller bottle to get to a tighter spot, or even a one shot? If you're in the field, it might not occur to you until it was too late.
Correct. Right. And you want to keep your day going, right? We're out there to have some fun, like,
yeah.
And it happens. Stuff happens. We don't anticipate. We always have to anticipate it. It's like that old Boy Scout, right? Hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Right.
If you keep the single shots, the single use in your flight box, you're planning for the worst, and you're ready to go. If something happens and you need to glue it right back together, glue it back together. Grab a cold drink and go back out there and have some fun and enjoy the rest of your day.
I know when I crashed my first big airplane, it was a Booker, and I just couldn't conceive of how this thing was going to go back together. And that was before I understood how BOSSA and CA worked,
Okay. Yeah. So that's the down and dirty on ZAP-a-Gap. What other questions do you have for me today, Jim?
I think that's it. I think what I've taken away today is that I need to buy some ZAP-a-Gap ASAP.
There you go. Good. I like that. And use it for everything.
Well, yeah. So not only for the airplanes, but I have a full workshop. I've become the go-to guy, which I guess is my role here in the house when something breaks. And so, like the other day, my son cracked the refrigerator plastic shelf, and I used thin CA and fiberglass cloth, and you can't see it, and it went together fine. But it would have been so much easier with that fiberglass cloth if I was brushing the CA on instead of just squirting and hoping that it was going to go everywhere,
Sure.
So that alone would have saved me. It's a $200 shelf, by the way.
Yeah, that stuff is very expensive.
Crazy. And then the other thing I'll say, a post from airplanes is I use CA on guitar finishes every so often when I have to. And I have an acoustic guitar where the ivory, I forget, it's like the herringbone piece that goes around the edge has come off. And I'm always afraid to get too crazy with CA because it'll glaze onto the finish. But with the brush, I'd be able to brush on my bare wood, lay my piece back on top with some tape, and that'd be that.
Correct. Yep. And this is also really nice when you're working on your bows. For the fiddle or violinists out there, this does not wick too far when they're making their bows with that natural hair. Right. And it doesn't get too bad with the natural hair, is we've all known because of the fly fishing side of it. There you go. Yep. So, when you put the ZAP-a-Gap in there, it doesn't wick up the hair as much like it would with the thin, like you would have on a paintbrush. So you just put a little ZAP-a-Gap in there, and then they tighten it back up on the other side.
So if the question is, can I play the violin? The answer is, I can torture that thing. So I can't really make it scream.
I cannot carry a tune in a bucket or play any type of musical instrument.
So I've always had the idea of writing a book called So Now You Own a House, Here's Every Tool That You'll Need. Starting off with the most important, let's say just a hammer.
Right.
But I think right in the top 10, next to 100-mile-an-hour tape, gaffer's tape, would be CA. It's a tool that is needed and can be used on so many different applications, you know?
Yes. Yes, it is. And it's easily accessible. And now that, with the all the hobby shops that are out there, the Amazon Primes of the world, um, the different stores, the all of them, it's available everywhere. And I keep stressing it over and over again. Less is more. Don't sit there and take your glue bottle and go, I'm going to fill this whole thing with glue, and then I'm going to put this on here, and now, it said to wait 10 seconds or 15 seconds. 15 seconds is up. Well, why didn't it stick? It's dripping everywhere. Well, yeah, because you put too much on. That's why it's taking so long.
With that said, I've found that sometimes I can blow on CA and make it stick quicker. So
Mhm.
is it reacting to the moisture or the air? What exactly
Yeah,
makes that
moisture.
CA?
Yeah,
Moisture.
moisture in
Okay.
your hair, in your breath. Yeah.
Right.
So, yep. So,
All
yeah.
right. Well, that is the basics of ZAP-a-Gap, a glue I didn't even know I needed, and now I can't believe I've never known about this all these years.
And that's why I shake my head a little bit over here that you can't see it, is with most of our customers. Flipping over here, most of our customer base, the ZAP-a-Gap is their go-to.
Right.
We sell more ZAP-a-Gap than any one of our other CAs. I got to get used to this. Right is left, left is right on the camera. It's but this is the go-to. This is our flagship glue.
You know what's interesting is I right when I started to fly is when I started working for Hobby Lobby here in Nashville, and so we had a warehouse full of all the things that would be in the catalog. And
Mhm.
when I needed like to build an airplane for the catalog, I would go to the back and pull everything I needed. So every Zap glue on Earth was back there. And the question is, how did no one say this to me? Or how is so? If I don't know this, I'm curious who else doesn't know. If you didn't know about ZAP-a-Gap until today, say something down in the comments, and I'm just curious to see what the reality out there is of the knowledge of ZAP-a-Gap.
Yep. And then as we go into the next one, so next week we'll talk about Slow Zap, which is our thick glue. There's not a lot of people that know about Slow Zap.
Okay, awesome.
Which is thicker, and going down the same line, you get larger gap filling. You get more working time. You can reset it. So there's your little teaser for next week.
Okay, Slow Zap.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I appreciate you taking time and telling us about this form of Zap glue of the whole family of Zap. And once again, the link will be down below where you can go check all this out and order it. And Mike, if they have questions, do you answer emails and things like that?
We do. Yep. It's just zap@robart.com. Okay. Or you can check out House of Balsa. Okay. I don't know his email address. I'm sorry. I should have that. Or Frank Tiano Enterprises. Carol answers emails over there also. Okay. So feel free to reach out to any one of us. We'll take care of you for sure.
Awesome.
All right. So go grab a bottle of ZAP-a-Gap and start building your next project.
All right. Big thanks to Mike and Carol and Zap and the whole enterprise over there. And thanks to all of you who hang out with us in the live chat and just watch our videos in general. I'm Jim T. Graham with the RC Groups. This is Mike from Robart. Mike, have a great weekend.
Bye, bud. Talk to you soon.
Bye, y'all.